So here's a question from Chris. Will you go after Amazon because of what they have done to Seattle, and what they've done to the homeless in Seattle is disgusting? As I'm sure you already know, that's in reference to the homeless tax that Amazon pitched a big fit about and ended up getting their way.
Oh, yes, the head tax is what we called it. I actually would have liked the scope of the head tax to be more dialed in to focus specifically on Amazon. Because the fact is, these corporations come into cities, they bring in a lot of work, which is great, but they also displace communities. They help with the gentrification of areas that kick out entire neighborhoods. They create a homeless population. They create a false inflation in our housing and rental prices. And they don't do anything about it. They don't reinvest in these communities. They don't reinvest in our homelessness problem. They don't do anything in the community to try and stop the problems that they create. Then they just say things like, oh, it's not our fault there's a homelessness crisis. Yes, it is. It directly relates to you. So absolutely, I want to pursue these kinds of big companies. Jeff Bezos has $150 billion that he's just sitting on. And at a certain point, there's this diminishment. There's this, oh my gosh, I can't think of the phrase, but it basically is diminishing returns. That's the phrase I was looking for. There's a diminishing return with that kind of wealth. He's not creating anything. He's not contributing to the community. He's not putting it back into the community. He's not putting it back into his laborers, and nobody's doing anything about it. I mean, it's not just Amazon you see this kind of thing with. We need to fight back against Apple and their stock buybacks. They spent $100 billion on stock buybacks to falsely inflate their stock prices and bonus out their CEOs and their board members millions and millions of dollars. They spent $30 billion on their employees. That means they spent 3 times as much to give their CEO and executive boards more money than they did on the people that made them that money. And this is our moment as working people to say enough is enough. We're tired of making these people this money and not seeing it come back into our communities, like with Amazon and like with Apple. We're tired of sitting around waiting for their cup to fill up so much that it trickles down to the rest of us. I think it was Pope Francis who straight up said the cup just gets bigger, right? And we need a congressional hold on that cup to shrink its size and force that to come back down into the working people. It's time that we actually got to benefit from the fruits of our labors, that we actually got to have something tangible in our communities that we can show for all this work that we do. These companies build their fortunes on our backs with our labor, our blood, sweat, and tears. They build it with our lack of ability to have families, with our lack of ability to own homes, our lack of ability to get the healthcare that we need. And enough is enough. It's time that the scales tip back in favor of the working people. So absolutely, I would pursue companies like Amazon and Apple that do that kind of stuff and that don't reinvest in their employees and that refuse to provide solid working conditions for their warehouse employees, which is unbelievable. They just eat the fines. Let's give them a fine that they can no longer eat. That's what I say.
So let me ask you this. It's just kind of like I want to sort of peek under the hood because, you know, I haven't been back up to Seattle in a long time, or the area. I used to live there. I do miss it. It's a wonderful place. But so Amazon made a big stink about that. And that, of course, was national news. We covered it on this show. We covered it on the Jimmy Dore show. Lots of people were talking about it. There were 600 other businesses that were going to have to pay this tax as well. And it seems like none of them had that big of a problem with it. It seems like Amazon was the only person crying. Now, first of all, is that accurate? I can't say for sure that that's accurate. I mean, it seemed that way from my perspective as somebody who wasn't totally on the inside in the area. And second of all, if so, why do you think that was? What's your kind of insider perspective there?
So Amazon was certainly the loudest. I think there was one other local dealership group that was upset about it because they got affected. And I can understand that. You know, these are medium and large local businesses that actually just function right here in Seattle who do contribute a lot to our local economies. But at the same time, Amazon really was the loudest about it. And I think one of the things that we have here in the Pacific Northwest is we have this idea of responsibility to our community. And so when you have these local, medium and large businesses that are affected by it, they say, oh, this is annoying, it's frustrating. But they also recognize that there is a responsibility to the community here, because without the local community, those businesses don't exist. And Amazon pitches this big fit because they don't feel any kind of obligation to any local community anywhere. They just kind of move around and displace living people and pay working people a less than living wage and provide them horrible working conditions. And then when people get grumpy enough, they threaten to pack up and leave because they don't actually foster any kind of community here. They don't believe that they're fully invested in this community. I think there's an entire lack of personal responsibility on Amazon's account. And I think that that's why they pitched a big fit, is because they didn't feel that personal responsibility. It was the whole like, F you got mine kind of mentality that comes out sometimes. And that's really what Amazon was doing. They were pitching a fit like, got mine, it's your problem that you're homeless. And that kind of attitude, that might have flown in the late 80s and the early 90s. But now we know, oh, wow, it is all of our problem. And Amazon refuses to move, and they refuse to transition into the modern age of moral business and moral politics. And our Pacific Northwest businesses knew that. And it's time Amazon learned it too.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make